What's going on, Wolfpack? It is your boy, the Wolf of Roto Street, here with another episode of the Fantasy Fullback Dive, a new episode of the Fantasy Fullback Dive, where we always pave your path to fantasy 2019 titles, but this time we're going to pave your path to millions and millions of dollars, because this is a daily fantasy-centric episode. I, of course, actually not of course, but for the first time ever, am joined by our resident DFS guru, JimboSlice. Jimmy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Excited to get some DFS picks in this week. Hopefully we can try and, make everyone some money.
Hell yeah, absolutely. I'm all about it. It's Thursday night, so I know some of our picks, there's injuries we got to consider. We'll bring that stuff up as we're talking about, David Johnson, how much is Chase Edmunds, some plays like that we'll consider. Things will change. We can talk about those on our fantasy tailgate live at Old Planners this Sunday. If you're a local guy and you're in the Boston, Beverly, North Shore area, come on down to Old Planners Brewing. We're going to be doing our show live from there, but the usual fantasy tailgate crew will still be live on Facebook for all you guys too. But we'll also cover, any DFS stuff that might change between now and then. Next week, we're thrilled. We're going to be able to have one of our buddies, Rich Zenos, who's fresh off winning, I think, 64K this last weekend on DFS. He's a professional. He does it, full-time at this point, and he wanted to hear us do a show real quick, get the feel for it, how it's going to flow and whatnot, and then he's going to join us next week, and he knows what he's doing, and I think we, Jimbo, know what we're doing better than most, but we still haven't hit that, $1 million payday, so this will be the week. We're going to pump this content out, and then we can just say, you should have listened to this podcast, you would have been a millionaire. What are your thoughts, Jimbo?
It sounds like a great idea to me. I mean, I like to think we know what we're doing, but when you're winning $64,000 in a weekend, that's next level.
What would you do?
So
Yeah,
it'd be nice to have it.
What would you do if you just won $64,000?
I'd probably head right to Vegas or some casino.
Somewhere to blow it all. Exactly. Exactly. Fully with you. Alrighty, so I just want to set the tone real quick we're both GPP focused. I don't know how many cash games you play a week. I do exactly 0. I don't really care about doubling my money up. I don't need to be smart with my bankroll. I want to throw 20 to the wind and hope it hits for $1 million. So this is going to be a GPP focused podcast. If you feel like, chiming in with any cash plays, and what I mean by that, of course, is GPP is the tournament style where you're, any listeners that are new to DFS, you're trying to beat out, 20% of the crowd to just get a crack at the pot, whereas 50-50, you have better odds at winning, but you have much lower stakes, much less to win, even if your odds are much higher in those type of formats. So whereas cash, you're trying to get like safe, high floor guys, it's all about the ceilings in GPP. So when me and Jimmy are giving our picks, we're focused on that millionaire maker. So that means no Monday night football, no Sunday night football. If you're on Thursday night, if this somehow got out in that much time, none of those guys, no primetime matchups, just those 1 to 4 slates is what we are going to be analyzing tonight. We're going to go position by position, give you kind of the big guys we're considering at each that we really have to just have on every single team. Those middle range guys that give you those nice, banister floor type things in your lineup. And then, of course, some of the most important stats to know with DFS is both the low cost, just kind of salary savers, we call them, under 4K, and then also the expected chalk. Rich was nice enough to lend me his Roto Grinders account, where they do a very great job of projecting who's going to be the highest owned players. And it's just as important in daily fantasy to not only get the guys right and hit those low-cost boomers and get the right big guys at the high price, it's equally important to fade those big-cost guys, those high-owned guys that end up not performing as you might expect of them. So we'll go through those, what guys are going to be 20, 30% owned in almost every lineup that we think could bust or at least not perform as to expectations. And then we might talk about a couple matchups that we're really looking forward to this weekend as well. Jimbo, how's the agenda sound to you?
Sounds perfect for me. I'm ready to roll.
Let's do it. And we'll get right into running back. I always love to start with the horses. It's natural to just go quarterback, running back, but let's get to the horses. That's where it matters. That's where the money is made. I heard a stat about how I think only one of the last 34 millionaire makers had anything other than 3 running backs in the lineup. It was a wide receiver flex. A couple here and there have those tight ends where they get the huge money, but it's almost always 3 big horses that get the play day and those big GPPs. So Jimbo, who you paying up for this week? Who do you have to have in your lineup?
That strategy going after running backs big, it makes sense because, with running backs, you're guaranteed the touches, whereas receivers, you don't always know what's going to happen. Expect a Keenan Allen to get, 10 to 12 targets, nearly double-digit catches, but, it's not always guaranteed. At least with the running back, you can get anywhere from 15 to 20 carries, and then you always want to target those pass-catching running backs to get those extra cheap full PPR points. So that's like why guys like McCaffrey are just so good in this format here. But as far 100%. As running backs I'm targeting, Alvin Kamara is one guy at 8,000. I feel like he's going to be a pretty popular play this week, but he's someone that's in a right matchup against the Jaguars. We saw McCaffrey go off last week, and I know Kamara's not exactly as godlike as McCaffrey might be, but he's still very good.
100%.
In a lot of fantasy drafts this year. So I love Kamara, and I feel like Le'Veon Bell might be the most underpriced guy on this slate this week at 6,400. Just his sheer volume is insane, and you get Darnold back this week, so that offense should take so many more steps forward. He's a guy who could get easily 25 to 30 touches, and at that volume with that price, that's going to be hard to pass up for me.
100%. I'm fully with you. Both of those guys are almost must-owns for me, especially Bell at 6.4K. I have him locked into every lineup. And when you're looking at projected ownership, I know you said Kamara might be, one of the highest owned guys. He's actually projected to only be 9.4. So not overly high, not overly owned. I think a lot of people are still nervous about Teddy Bridgewater, despite him lighting it up last week, 4 touchdowns, 314 yards. So I'm with you. They're very susceptible, the Jags are, to pass-catching backs, to giving up those screens. And especially if Ramsey's out and it becomes even easier to move the ball and touchdown chances are more plentiful. I'm all about Kamara, paying up at 8K for him. I'm all about Le'Veon Bell, so I just, reiterating what you're saying. And then some other guys I'm looking at there too, especially because he's projected to only be 3% owned, is a guy like Derrick Henry. There's such a stigma. The guy doesn't catch passes. I get that, so nobody wants to take him on DraftKings. As I think generally what you said there, you want the pass catchers, you want the 3-down horses, but in a matchup against Denver, giving up, the 29th ranked to the running back, so giving up the 4th most points, I could see like a 3-touchdown Derrick Henry day. He's only 6.1K owned. I mean, a 6.1K salary, and whereas Carson's 6,000, right under him, everybody's going there. Everyone's projected, right around a 20 to 30% owned guy for Carson. That might be a nice pivot move, where everyone's going one way. You get the guy that actually ends up getting more points. That's how it worked out for week 1, actually, is Henry outscored Carson at the same price, and nobody had Henry in there. So that's who I'm looking up in terms of paying up, is definitely that Kamara. I'll echo that. Bell's locked in all my lineups. I think Ingram's going to score 3 touchdowns too. So I really like all of them because they're all 8K or less. So I'm a huge fan of the guys you said. I don't really have too much new to add other than Henry, that low-owned potential guy that I might sneak into a lot of lineups. What about that, $4,000 to $6,000 range? Is there anybody that stood out to you in that price point?
Devonta Freeman doesn't look too bad at 58. I know we love to target guys
Freeman?
that are playing against the Cardinals.
What do you like about Freeman?
Just the fact that they're playing Arizona.
Okay.
And Freeman, he's been getting decent amount of DraftKings points. He scored 18 points in back-to-back weeks. And he's done that with only 1 receiving touchdown last week and no touchdowns the week before. So the volume's there. He's catching passes. I just feel like it's one of those plays that's not sexy, but it could be low owned and could pay off big time.
Okay. Anybody else in the mid range? You got Freeman. Any other names? 11% owned for Freeman, by the way. You touched on
Carson earlier.
Yeah. Carson earlier, yeah.
Oh, that's okay. That's not bad.
That's not too bad.
I guess one of the lower guys, Adrian Peterson at 4,500. It's kind of meh. I don't really like too many guys in like the 4 to 5K range because I like spending up at running back. But if I had to go cheap, I guess AP's not bad. Miami's just god awful. This is like that one game where it's like everyone writes off AP and then he can come out and run for like 120 something yards and 2 scores because he's just a freak. And this is like their one chance to do anything remote on offense.
I really like that call, actually. And right now it's looking like he's only going to be 1.2% owned, but they're getting Bill Callahan, who's ancient. And, those ancient guys, when they come in, they love to have those run-heavy scripts. He's an ex-offensive line coach. He's going to want to get those guys moving. And their line isn't all that bad. So ultimately, I like the AP call. It's similar to Henry. He's going to be so low-owned because he's not a pass-catching guy, but ultimately could have that 2-score day at 4.5K and very low-owned. I like that one a lot. The guy I'm looking at more so in that range, though, is Tevin Coleman, only 4.4K. You often see this where the Monday night pricing factor Chapter, and they didn't know how good Coleman was going to look. That guy looked faster than I think I've ever seen him. The holes were massive, and I know they lost their right tackle, so I'm a little bit nervous. Is he going to see such easy sledding? But the Los Angeles Rams are giving up the 8th most points to running backs on the season. So between him and Breida, and this was kind of getting his feet under him, Tevin Coleman, I could definitely see him getting unleashed even more of a presence in the red zone and goal line, have a multiple score day at only 4K. I'm all about that one too. So those are the two kind of mid-range guys. I like the AP call. I like him a lot there as well. And there's something a little bit sneaky intriguing to me. I don't know why. I always get myself drawn into him. Is Kenyon Drake at 4.4. I don't know why. Maybe it's just that growth. I know. I deserve it. I deserve every second of that. But it's just, I could see him having one of those, they're in comeback mode, has 8 catches and rips in a score, just so low priced, and no one's going to have the guy in their lineup because it is exactly like you said.
That's the thing.
No one's going to have him, and it could just have one final Drake day that we haven't seen. And then maybe they're going to try to trade him too. You know how they could try to showcase the guy at the trade deadline approaching?
Yeah,
I don't know. I could see something about him.
I feel like if he's got one chance to do anything, it's this week.
Yeah.
And I would trust him so much more than the other shitty backup that you might get to later on. So
yeah, and I hate the fact that I even typed his name out, but when you get under 4K, it gets hideous out here. There's really nobody.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking at Latavius Murray at 3.7 because he might plot his way into the end zone. Running back is typically not where I cut costs. I'll just throw that out there. I like to cut costs at tight end. Yep. I like to cut it at quarterback and wide receiver. You can often find, like last week, Will Fuller, 4.5. Like that, 50 points at 4.5. You don't usually find that at running back, a running back that scores all that much. So it's, to me, I'm going to probably pay up for 3 of those bigger names we already discussed. But if I was desperate, if I was looking, and I should mention before we even get down there, Chase Edmunds is 4.6, and if DJ didn't play, that guy could go off at that price point. So I'd really like him. I actually didn't even check what Malcolm Brown is. I don't know. Have you seen what Malcolm Brown's price is?
He's 4.3.
4-3. So, yeah, I mean,
yep.
If Gurley's out, I know the 49ers are giving up only the second fewest points to running back, so a very tough matchup, but still volume in that offense that should still be in the goal line plenty. 2 guys that are in that mid-range that you got to keep track of their starter status. But down to the creatures, I mentioned Murray at 3.7, could plot in the end zone. The one that you're probably sickened by is Kalen Ballage, maybe the worst talent in the NFL that actually gets used. But it's, again, Washington, the 26th ranked against the run, just god-awful. He's only 3.3. And all you need at that point, but you're going that cheap, is 1 touchdown. And could the guy have that? Maybe. I'm probably not looking at any of these guys, but maybe, just maybe, he falls his fat ass into the end zone once. Who are you looking at if you had to save money at running back?
Yeah, if you're going to play someone down this cheap, usually it's because of an injury, and then some guy gets thrust into a bigger role, kind of like with Wayne Gallman, I think a couple weeks ago, was 4,200, and he was in line for a huge workload, and that paid off great.
Yeah.
A couple guys, I know we mentioned the whole Gurley and Malcolm Brown thing. There's a little bit of chatter on Darryl Henderson. He's only 32. I mean, he's done really nothing all year, and McVay was kind of like, oh, maybe this is the week we lean on him if Gurley's out. So if Gurley is indeed out, he's maybe someone I'd like sprinkle a tiny bit on. I doubt it, though. I don't think I could trust him.
Yeah.
As far as anyone else, maybe Gus Edwards at 3,900, just because they're going to beat up on the Bengals so bad and be like, all right, Gus, you go do some garbage time work and stumble into a touchdown. But
I like that call.
Anything down here,
I like the Gus call. I had Justice Hill written down myself at 3-2. Maybe this is the week he finally gets, they're up so big. Let's try to get him some run. Could be, backup Ravens running back week. But yeah, as we both kind of agree, running back's not the position to skimp at. And just looking at the chalk here, some of the best information I think out there is, again, not just getting the guys right, but also getting the sits right. Getting the guys that are almost in every lineup, in every other owner's lineup, making sure they're not in it is just an equal way to gain an edge as it is finding the right people. And this week, the highest percent owned projections from Roto Grinders, they do some of the best ones in the business, are Ezekiel Elliott's the highest owned running back, 32.7%. Leonard Fournette right below him at 29.2%. Then Lev Bell, our guy, 17.5%. Chris Carson at 16.3%. And then they have Gurley and Johnson, but who knows how that's going to be. And Dalvin Cook there at 11% are like the top 6 or so highest owned projected guys. Are you fading any of those guys? Are there any that you're like, I don't care how high owned, I still am going to have in my lineup? What are your thoughts on the chalk here?
I hate to say it, but I'd kind of rather fade Zeke. I feel like we've been waiting for that like patented Zeke game where he rushes for like 150 and 2 scores and then catches a handful of passes and puts up like a monster game, and it just hasn't happened. And of course, now that I say that, it'll probably be this week, but I'd much rather trust a Kamara. Fournette's getting a ton of volume. Lev Bell's getting the volume. Like, we're not getting the typical Zeke feed him the ball left and right. So for 8,500, I'm just going to fade him and save myself $1,000 or so by playing like Lev Bell or Kamara.
Absolutely. I'm fully with you. Zeke, I'm not paying up for it at that price. I'm actually shocked to see his ownership percentage that high. I get the Jets are horrendous. I get that could be a game flow. That means let's pound it out with our guy, Zeke Elliott. Even still, though, this offense is new. Kellen Moore's system, they utilize Dak so much more when they get in close, using his rushing ability, using his throwing ability. It's just centered around him and not Zeke any longer, and I'm fully with you. And I don't like Leonard Fournette that much. I mean, 6.7's a nice price for the volume you're getting, but New Orleans is giving up the 4th fewest points to running backs right now. And if this becomes, if they get up big early, I can see Fournette getting game flowed out of here. So I like fading both of the highest owned guys and looking at guys like Kamara at only 9% owned, looking at Ingram at right around 11% owned. Le'Veon Bell, the 3rd highest owned. I just can't avoid it at 6.4K. The matchup isn't bad. They're getting up the 10th most points to running backs. Dallas is. Yeah, we saw what Aaron Jones just did to those guys. I mean, I have him in my lineups, and I just haven't lost my erection since having him in my lineup. It's been unbelievable. And Le'Veon, if Aaron Jones can do that, Le'Veon Bell can certainly do that. And he had 20 points with Darnold, his only game with Darnold last time. Darnold's finally back in the lineup, so I'm all about getting him in, even if that 17.5% is a decent amount of ownership. So yeah, I'm all about that. Let's switch our attention now to wide receivers. You have to start 3 of them. The option to start 4, so definitely a very important position in DraftKings as well. Who are you paying up for this week at wide receiver, Jimbo?
I love all 7K range right now. I guess of my favorite right now, I'd say Cooper Kupp, because almost you know what you're getting with him. He's Goff's favorite target. And then especially if Gurley's not going to play, that just means they're probably going to throw more and more, especially with the 49ers stout run defense. So, Kupp gets a lot of targets, a lot of catches. I love him. Big fan of DeAndre Hopkins this week because, after the huge Will Fuller explosion, I feel like he's going to get more of a spotlight, and then it's going to take more people off of DeAndre. This is like a prototypical Hopkins bounce back game. And he hasn't even been that. I mean, he's still been good, but he hasn't been like the Hopkins that we all love and know, where like week 1 where he put up 34. The best after that's been 15.8 last week. So I feel like he's due for a nice 20 to 30 point explosion coming up here.
Yeah, I've got Hopkins as my guy too, 7.4K for all the reasons you listed. He's the 2nd highest projected ownership. So a lot of people are getting that same mindset as us. Fuller not too far below at 13.7%, 6K. So I think I'm going to pay up and take that 7.4K and get DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, his stats against the Chiefs historically: 452, 3 touchdowns, 7, 113, 1 score, 998 for 2 scores, and a 669 line, which is the worst of them, but still at 69, so whatever. Hopkins, though,
nice.
Yeah, seriously, such a good joke there, huh? But yeah, Hopkins, though, I do think this is the final game we've all been sitting there and waiting for. Who knows if that ends up being right, because if you ended up fading him and he's the 2nd highest owned wide receiver, that would be the right move, obviously. But I think this is it. I think this is where we finally get 120 2 TD Hopkins monster, just because that game flow too. What a shootout we should be expecting there. And the other guy, because I like a shootout there, and you see this so often. Later on in the show we're going to break down matchups that we really want to exploit, but we might as well just talk about them now. If Tyreek Hill plays at 6'9", I mean, that is an unbelievable price for a guy. I get that it's a little bit nerve-wracking using someone that hasn't played all year, but ultimately Watkins might be out anyways. This is a defense giving up the second most points to wide receivers, and we know, that's going to be a back and forth game. I just cannot wait for the fireworks. And Tyreek Hill in those back and forth firework games, I just keep picturing that Rams Monday Night Football game where Reek had like literally 60 something. It was insanity. Although I guess he didn't outscore Will Fuller somehow, so it might have been like 49 or whatever the hell it was. But still, Tyreek Hill, I think would just get right into where he's always been and bomb that team. So I kind of like going both big receivers in that matchup there. And we talked about, wide receivers a good spot to save money because a lot of times it's those middle range guys. That 4,500 Will Fuller play last week or whatever it might be ends up blowing up for you. Who are a few guys in that mid range that you're looking at to potentially save some budget that could perform just as good, if not better, than some of the bigger names?
I like Terry McLaurin this week in 6,000 against Miami. Kind of piggybacking on AP. Anytime you can play against Miami, you got to take advantage of it. And he's been a touchdown machine from, granted, the 1 week that they played the Pats and he got locked up by Stephon Gilmore, which is expected. But, he's been so good for a team that's been just awful. So, especially if Keenum comes back, they had some pretty good chemistry. I like him at 6,000. And then on top of that, Michael Gallop I always feel like he's a great tournament play because, he gets a lot of the long touchdown and long receptions. For only 5,600 in this offense, they've been airing it out so much, like you said earlier, under Kellen Moore and focusing on Dak. And while Amari's been feasting, Gallup's been doing just as good, maybe not as good, like entirely as good, but he's still putting up about 22-something DraftKings points per week. And his target numbers, 7, 8, and 14 in the 3 games that he's played are insane for a wide receiver too. So he's a guy that I would consider as well in that middle tier range.
Yeah, he's averaging, I think, like 113 pass yards per game, receiving yards rather. So I love Gallop too. And McLaurin, what I love about him is Will Fuller's also the same price. And I think that's one of those things where almost everyone gravitates to the 6. If I'm paying $6K, I might as well go for the 50-point guy. Whereas it could really be McLaurin, 21, 15, 16 points or so in his first few weeks, was averaging over half of his team's air yards with Case Keenum at the QB's position. So I really like that his boy is back. I think that's a great play at 6,000. Some other, prices that just don't seem aligned with how much value you could get out of the guys. Cortland Sutton's only 5,000 and Sanders is only 4,800. Tennessee's given up only, 9th most points to wide receivers. So not necessarily a juicy matchup and not necessarily a juicy offense, but Sutton in particular has been right around 18. He's averaging 17.4 per game, but he had one dud and the rest have been really solid. I don't hate Jarvis Landry at 5.2. He's kind of become that engine of the game. I did want to mention Odell Beckham's only 6'8" this week, and that's as low as I think I've ever seen Odell Beckham. Are you intrigued at all, or are you still just full out, like, not even touching him?
I'm very intrigued with Odell. I expect him to be pretty popular, and it seems like he's getting frustrated with the losses and the lack of production, which is kind of building into that squeaky wheel narrative that we saw with Adam Thielen last week. And Thielen exploded. So this could be one of those patented classic Odell games here. So I'd be very intrigued at him with that low price.
Yeah, and he is the chalkiest play of the week. We'll get to the chalk report in a little bit, but he's the only guy higher than DeAndre Hopkins. Part of it, the price, part of it, the squeaky wheel narrative. And a lot of chalk here this week, too. A lot of people all about DJ Chark. He's only 5.5 right now, which seems like a great price for the 5th most highest scoring wide receiver in fantasy. Do you buy the Chark hype? What are your thoughts on him?
I want to, but at the same time, he's probably going to get matched up with Lattimore, and I think Lattimore was on Mike Evans last week, who put up a goose egg, which kind of scares me a little bit. I know the Saints are a team that you can target against with pass catchers in your offense. Maybe not if you're Dallas, but I mean, Chark is kind of a sexy play, but I'd rather spend up the extra 100 on Gallop or go a little farther down the list. So yeah, I'm kind of off Chark.
I see what you're saying. Lattimore has been playing inspired ball, so we'll see on that one. The only other mid-range guys I wanted to highlight here are your Cardinals wide receivers. Larry Fitz, 6.1K, and then much lower percentage owned just because he's injured was Christian Kirk at 5.2K. Both guys average right around 12 or so targets when they're both out there and healthy on the field. And this has that shootout style feel. I know we've already mentioned that Houston and Kansas City game, but this could be a sneaky, second type of game that you just want as many players as you can, as much action as you can, but they all come at much cheaper prices than the big marquee names of the other ones. I could see the old man Fitz going for 120 and 2 and just dominating this Arizona team that got murdered by Will Fuller. It's been getting murdered all year by wide receivers, so I like both of those guys. And we mentioned it's harder to save money at running back than wide receiver. I always try to find that low cost wide receiver to get there that could boom and explode in my lineup. Do you have any guys you're looking at for real cheap this week?
Yeah, I feel like one of the popular guys is going to be Preston Williams out of Miami. He seems like more of a cash play guy. If you're going to go tournament and you want to get creative, I'm going to hate saying this, but Devontae Parker at 4-2 offers that much higher ceiling. I know he sucks, but he's the guy that if they somehow throw a deep ball touchdown, it's probably going to be him, and he'll put up the 20 points or whatever you need to win that tournament. So I feel like he's kind of the pivot off of Preston if you want a nice tournament, or maybe not nice, but if you want a Hail Mary tournament play there, Devontae Parker. Cheaper guys, maybe Jamison Crowder at 4,000 now that Darnold's back. He might get peppered again with targets. And if
Robbie A is also only 4K as well, so intriguing. Both those guys. I like that Darnold. And you talk about GPP plays. Anderson hasn't done much, but we've seen 172 TD days from this guy before at 4,000. Not all that shabby. I like that price range on both Jets guys. Yeah.
Anderson's definitely a great tournament play. Even last year, he was probably one of the better tournament plays.
For sure.
If Kirk doesn't suit up for some reason, Keyshawn Johnson at 3,900 is a guy to look at.
I'm waiting for this guy to fucking do something, and every week it's the week to play him, and every week he doesn't do shit. No, I'm off that one. Sorry, Jimbo. Can't get your back on that. No, fuck Keyshawn Johnson. I'm done with him. You know who I do like? I saw you listed this guy too, Byron Pringle. I mean, Sammy Watkins, the hamstring. Yeah. It seems like that's flared up. I get that Tyreek Hill could and probably will. My guess is Hill plays, but especially if Hill and Watkins both sit. I mean, I could not have Byron Pringle out of my lineup at 3,500, despite the fact that his name is fucking Pringle. I mean, it's terrifying to put that into your lineup, but he was clearly Mahomes' preferred target. There was rave reviews about him all camp, and he just was running open at will. So, I mean, Mecole Hardman and Robinson, both in that 5 to 6K range. I'll take the cheapest possible option, who also might be Mahomes' personal favorite at this point of the season. I love that stab that you threw out there. And the last one I want to put out there for cheap wide receivers is Kiki Cutie. Now, I know Kenny Still's status is still up in the air, and if he plays, this becomes less attractive because now there's 4 mouths to feed. But again, I want all the action I can get in that game, and it doesn't have to be the expensive ones. I could do Pringle, and I could do Kiki Cutie, and I'm just waiting for it. We've seen it before. Those 11 catch monsters, and he's capable of it. We know he's done it before. He did it as his first game ever in the NFL. He set a record for receptions. So we know he has that high volume, high reception potential. And if everybody on that defense is focused on Will Fuller just blew up, and then we also know we got to stop Hopkins, that middle of the field could be wide open for Cutie. So I'm a fan of potentially looking his way at 3,500 if I'm saving up at wide receiver. Any other names you want to highlight, or should we move on to the tight ends and QBs?
I think we can move on. There's no Auden Tates in here from last week, so no. we can move on.
I will mention just the quick chalk report. We've already talked a bit about it, but Odell highest percent owned projection at 19.5. DeAndre Hopkins 17.7. Right below him, Landry the third most. Robert Woods at 15.7, and then DJ Chark the fifth most right after, and then Will Fuller follows him up. So those are the top 6 highest owned. I don't really love Woods or Landry. Neither of them need to be in my lineup. I was going to say,
Landry is surprising to me. I did not expect that one at all.
I think it's just a matter of, recency bias. He's had a couple big games in a row, and the price point is pretty nice at 5.2K, fresh off, that Monday night discount. But still, I'm surprised DJ Chark isn't a little bit higher at 5.5, if he's only going to be 14% owned, I might need to look at his way just a little bit more. I mean, this guy has been balling out. I do think he is the real deal. If he can get it done against Lattimore, then I'll fully believe it. So that name's going to intrigue me now. I thought his ownership was going to be a little bit higher. We'll move on to tight end, and I think this one's going to be pretty quick for both of us. I don't think we need to run through a ton of names because there's really only one guy I'm locking into my lineup, and I think I see here on the notes it's the same guy. Who are you going with, Jimmy?
Oh, Austin Hooper, baby.
That big white cock is going to thrash the Cardinals this week. It's too easy. Yep. I mean, Eifert obviously, clouds some owners' memory. It was such an easy stream. You got to go Eifert, and I was a moron and bought into it, and I was dead wrong. But that's Tyler fucking Eifert. He plays like 20% of the snap because he does not have anything between the legs. He's just such a little bitch. I fucking hate. Clearly, I don't like Eifert. But I think Austin Hooper's the exact opposite. One, it's a tight end friendly scheme with Dirk Cutter. He had like 11 targets just a couple weeks ago. He's been over 10 DraftKings points every single week. It might be the fourth highest scoring tight end in fantasy right now, maybe even higher than that. It was 3 just a week ago. The guy has been a clear-cut focal point of this offense, more so than even Julio Jones at this point, which won't continue, but still, Hooper has been that guy. So ultimately, the matchup with the Cardinals giving up over a touchdown more fantasy points than the next closest team, 8 more points than what Tampa Bay's giving up. I do really like Austin Hooper this week. At 5K, I think he's got to be the guy that you go with. Is there any other names you're like, if I have to save some money, or if he's, Hooper is the third most highest projected own, who else could you potentially look at if you wanted to save money at tight end?
If I'm going to go down a little bit, I mean, Mark Andrews is only 200 cheaper. That's not really much of a difference there. Mm-hmm. I don't like a ton. Noah Fant at 2,900 raises a little bit of attention to me. With the matchup against Tennessee, I feel like that's a decent, dart play to throw there. Aside from him, I mean, I'm so locked in on Hooper. There's not really much else I see out here.
Yeah. I mean, Kittle's only 200 more. He's also a lot chalkier at 25% owned, so most people think Kittle is going to be that guy, but the Rams have been surprisingly decent against the tight end this year. Travis Kelce, obviously, if you're 7K, for Travis Kelce is never a bad option, but he hasn't really had any of those blow-ups, and Houston's been limiting tight ends. So the only other guy I was intrigued potentially by was Gerald Everett, 3,600. He's off 19 targets the last 2 weeks. Seems like he might become, especially if Cooks is out, a number 2 option behind only Cooper Kupp. Just runs wide open over the middle of the field with so much other weapons to account for in that offense. He's got no attention from the defense, so I really like him at 3,600. Could be a cheap play. In terms of the chalk here, Kittle, as I mentioned, 25%. Andrews is actually second at 18% facing Cincy. Cincy's actually surprisingly decent against the tight end, though, this year. Austin Hooper's at third, 15.9, but the fact that he's at third makes me that much more excited about him at 5,000 against Arizona. He has to be the play. 2 touchdowns is coming this week at only $5,000. I'm trying to just see if there's anybody else I'd even consider. Nah, I mean, after them, it's really just maybe Everett, and nobody has Everett 1.1% owned. So if he does what he's been doing, that would be a great play. Disley at Cleveland, 4.9. But if you're playing 4.9, you might as well just get the Austin Hooper.
Might as well just
I like pivoting. I love the move of pivoting at somebody that's close, as I mentioned with Derrick Henry and Carson, but not this. This is just too juicy for me. I'm chasing the chalk on that one. What do you say? Sorry.
He's the third highest project. I feel like he should be like 60% owned this week.
I know. It blows my mind.
I feel like everyone's going to be on.
I know. It's just literally all the aligning of the stars. It just seems too perfect. But if he is the third highest owned, then my God, it's going to be such a value. But last but not least, we got to go to quarterbacks. I usually end up saving money at the position. My guy so far this week has been Kirk Cousins at only 5.2. I think he's averaging well over 300 yards against them. That was, of course, with the Redskins, and they were much pass happier. But there just seems to be a little bit of comfort level with Cousins facing the familiar divisional opponents we saw last week, bombing the Giants, and Philly secondary isn't all that much better than what the Giants roll out. So I could see Cousins having another 300, 2 to 3 score day at a very cheap price point. But who do you like at quarterback this week?
I love Cousins. He's one of my favorites this week. Like you said, Eagles, great funnel defense where they're good against the run, but their secondary is terrible. And we saw that last week when he just peppered Thielen and had a huge day. So I think Cousins and Thielen makes a really good stack this week. And even if he just does little dump offs with Dalvin Cook, he's a guy that can take 180 yards easily to the house, and that helps Cousins. So Cousins is a great play this week. The top 6 quarterbacks are all, I think, fantastic plays for the most part.
Yeah.
But Matt Ryan, to me, at 6,400 is definitely someone I'm going to look at, especially against Arizona. I know we keep picking on Arizona and Miami, but they're just so bad. And Arizona runs at such a high tempo, and they just get so many plays off where the score just keeps running up, and it's going to give Matt Ryan more chances to score points. And Matt Ryan's been really good. He's been averaging 26.1 points a week. That's right up there in the top tier. So Matt Ryan is one of my favorite plays for sure this week.
Yeah, only 6'4", a good way to save money and still get that elite, potential of a number 1 QB score. It is tough to avoid, and I'm definitely going to have at least a few lineups that have one with Watson, one with Mahomes, because that matchup could be like that Rams Monday Night Showdown we saw a couple years ago. And then Lamar Jackson, if you're looking at the chalk here, he's actually the projected highest owned at Cincinnati, giving up the second most points to QBs, and he's been destroying. When he gets the right matchup, he just eats them. So he's the highest. Deshaun Watson's the next, 6-7K salaries, 15% projected owned. Mahomes at 9.7 is the third. Cousins all the way down like the 7th or 8th highest projected own. And again, he's my number 10 QB in terms of my rankings, but I think priced right around like the 16th or 17th. So to me, I'm probably going to save money so I can stack up my running backs, but I still will have to have at least one lineup that features some of those marquee names of Watson and Mahomes. But I do love that Matt Ryan play. You put me onto that Hooper Ryan stack. Could go a long way against Arizona this week, so maybe it is a Matt Ryan week. I didn't really consider him until now. I like that recommendation, Jimmy. Is there any defenses that I didn't put this on the agenda, but is there anybody you're locked into on defense this week?
I've for the most part I've been paying down at defenses and just trying to find one that could fit a game script where the other team's throwing a lot and you try and get a score. So like hitting on the Panthers last week was nice. This week, for the first time or maybe not the first time ever, but this is the first time I've seen it where defenses are under $2,000.
Holy shit!
The Jets at 1,500 aren't that bad. They're averaging 10.8 a week, and that helps from defensive touchdowns that they've gotten, and they're probably going to get thrashed by Dallas. But at the same time, if you can, save yourself an extra $1,000, $2,000 by paying down to them at 1,500 to fit in another guy like, I don't know, like a Kamara or someone in your lineup, I feel like that's such a good play. Yeah. But if I'm looking at someone that's like, okay, maybe they're decent, I love rolling against Arizona. So give me the Falcons at 2,300. Kyler Murray gets sacked so many times. That offensive line is just awful. So you're going to get points there. And he throws so many bad interceptions and just creates all these stupid turnovers where that's just going to add up for your defense. So I think Atlanta's not too bad of a play.
And one of the reasons I really like Kyler Murray this week is, as horrible as that line is, we saw last week with Deshaun Watson, 0 sacks. Like, I think he was only pressured 5 times, and they've been getting murdered all year, that offensive line. That offensive line is bad, so the fact that they could not get to him tells me that pass rush is something abysmal. So as much as I like, that the script there because of how bad that line is, I don't know if Atlanta has the pass rushing chops to actually get to him. And if he can sit there and pick him apart, I wouldn't be shocked to see, Kyler Murray do similar things. Obviously not 41 like what Watson did, but he could have himself a big day. I kind of like the 49ers on defense facing the Rams, especially if Gurley's knocked out. Their D-line is so vicious, and the Rams' offensive line isn't close to what it ever was. And San Fran's got 15 points per week as a defense. That's a sneaky, only 2,700. Not a bad way to save some cash and get yourself an actually talented unit, because usually when you're this low, you're looking at complete shitstorms. I don't hate, the Vikings' potential at a pick 6, even though Philly is a great offense. And the Jaguars at 2,200, I get they've fallen far from what they used to be. They're only scoring 5 points a week. But this is Teddy Bridgewater. And if Ramsey is back, if Ramsey's not in, I'm not touching the Jaguars ever. But if Ramsey does end up playing, $2,200 really isn't that bad for a pretty talented unit going against Teddy fucking Bridgewater. Like, I don't hate that play either at defensive if I'm trying to save money. And I'm with you. I always try to trim at defense unless it's like the Patriots tonight facing that pathetic team.
Right.
Alrighty. I mean, that kind of, I didn't know exactly how the agenda would play out. I wanted to talk about a few matchups, but we've already kind of hit at KC and Houston, Atlanta, Arizona. Is there any other bold predictions or any other names you want to shout out before we sign off?
Let's see. Let me look through my notes here. I don't think I have much else.
No, I think we've covered everybody I want to. You mentioned RSJ, Ricky Seals-Jones, but like you're not playing Ricky Seals-Jones. Let's be real, too.
No, God no.
So
Austin Hooper is getting locked into every single lineup. And
that's your guy that you're no matter what.
Yes, definitely Hooper.
Yeah.
And you're definitely turning me onto the 49ers. You wouldn't think to target a team playing against the Rams, but it can make sense, especially if Gurley's out. They get a lot of pressure. Goff's going to throw picks. I mean, that's what he does. And he's going to get sacked a handful of times. So I'm turning on to the 49ers.
Am I turning you on? Yeah. Then they were projected very low owned, 1.9%. Lower owned than the Dolphins right now. I don't know why people aren't on that, but I could see them, as you mentioned, it's going to be a very pass-heavy script, and their secondary is nothing overly special, but that D-line is going to get to Goff plenty. I could see, a 6-sack day, maybe a strip-sack fumble, run it in for a touchdown. At 2,700, that's the defense I'm definitely targeting for sure. Alrighty, well, Jimbo, thank you so much for your time tonight. We're going to be trying to record these every week. We record right around Thursday night, and we're going to try to drop these on Friday a.m. For your commute, for you Saturday listeners getting ready. And, of course, as we mentioned, we have some guys we'll have to update you on. So on Sunday, this week, live from Old Planners Brewing. Again, if you're local, come on down. But we will make sure to check in with some of these picks. But I really enjoyed this podcast, Jimbo. I appreciate the time, and I think our listeners will enjoy this too.
Yeah, hopefully what we say, kind of mirrors what goes on Sunday, and we can make everyone some money and, come back for another episode next week.
Absolutely. And next week we'll be joined by Rich Zenos, who, again, as I mentioned at the top, is fresh off like a $60,000 week. So probably a guy you want to pay attention to, one of the top DraftKings ranked players, a legitimate professional at this. He has the status, the ranking of one, and we're lucky enough that we, knew him from high school, and he's a good buddy of ours and is willing to do a DFS show with us. So we're looking forward to have Rich. We have actually Ian Harditz lined up in a week or two as well for these DFS-centric episodes. So I'm looking forward to have him back on the show. But, this is our first intro episode. Let us know your feedback if you enjoyed it. You can find us at rotostreetjournal.com, where we breed and feed fantasy wolves. The Fantasy Fullback Dive is your path to millions of dollars, as well as 2019 fantasy titles. Make sure you follow us on all your socials and whatnot. The Fantasy Tailgate will be live this Sunday. Tune on in, folks. Thanks so much for all the support. We love you, Wolfpack, and we will be back soon. Later. All right, where's that button?